The needle slipped from Dr. Emma Clark's trembling fingers, clattering against the sterile metal tray as Sarah's scream pierced through the clinic's afternoon quiet. Blood. There was too much blood pooling beneath the examination table, and Emma's medical training couldn't explain why her best friend was hemorrhaging 3 months into what should have been a routine pregnancy. "Emma, what's happening to me?" Sarah's voice cracked, her grip on Emma's wrist so tight it left marks. "The baby." "Stay calm," Emma whispered, but her own heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed gauze to Sarah's abdomen. The bleeding wasn't stopping. Nothing about this made sense. Sarah's last ultrasound had been perfect, the baby healthy and strong. Now, in the span of minutes, everything was falling apart. "Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming." Emma's hands moved on autopilot, checking vitals, administering medication, but her mind kept circling back to 3 weeks ago when Sarah had first asked her to be their surrogate. The conversation replayed in fragments. Sarah's tears, her desperate plea about Marcus being away on business so much, how they'd tried for years to have a baby of their own. "I trust you more than anyone," Sarah had said, gripping Emma's hands across the coffee shop table. "You're a doctor, you understand the science. And with the anonymous donor program, everything would be completely professional." Emma had agreed because Sarah was like a sister to her. They'd been inseparable since medical school, had supported each other through residency, through Sarah's miscarriages, through Emma's divorce. When Sarah begged her to carry their child, how could she say no? But now, watching her friend's face contort in pain, Emma wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The clinic door burst open and Marcus filled the doorway, his usually calm demeanor shattered. Emma had always found Sarah's husband intimidating. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to see everything. Today, those eyes held something wild, almost animalistic. "Where is she?" His voice was rougher than usual, and Emma caught the strange way he sniffed the air before his gaze landed on Sarah. "Emma, what happened?" "I don't know." Emma's voice sounded thin even to herself. "She came in for her routine checkup and suddenly started bleeding. I've called for an ambulance, but no hospitals." Marcus moved to Sarah's side with fluid grace, and Emma noticed how her friend immediately relaxed at his touch. "We handle this ourselves." "Marcus, she needs." "I said no hospitals." His tone brooked no argument, and for a moment, Emma felt like prey being studied by a predator. Then his expression softened, and he was just Marcus again. Successful businessman, devoted husband, her friend. "Trust me, Emma. Sarah will be fine." Emma wanted to argue, but Sarah was already sitting up, color returning to her cheeks. The bleeding had stopped as suddenly as it had started. In 15 years of medicine, Emma had never seen anything like it. "I feel better," Sarah said softly, though her eyes avoided Emma's. "Much better." The silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions. Emma began cleaning up, her movements mechanical. Something was wrong here, something beyond medical explanation, but every time she tried to grasp it, the thought slipped away like smoke. "The donor program," she heard herself say. "Sarah, are you sure everything was handled properly? The screening, the genetic testing." Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look that made Emma's stomach clench. It lasted only a second, but in that moment, she felt completely shut out, like there were entire conversations happening in glances she couldn't understand. "Of course," Sarah said quickly. "Dr. Hartwell's clinic handles everything. You know how thorough they are." But Emma did know Dr. Hartwell's clinic. She'd referred patients there for years. They were meticulous about documentation, about keeping donors and recipients informed of every step. Yet she couldn't remember signing half the paperwork Sarah claimed existed. Couldn't remember the consultation she supposedly attended. The afternoon sun slanted through the clinic windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Emma found herself studying those shadows, how they seemed to move independently of the objects that cast them. She blinked hard, chalking it up to stress and lack of sleep. "I should go," Marcus said, helping Sarah to her feet. "Thank you, Emma. For everything." They left together, Sarah leaning heavily on her husband's arm, and Emma stood alone in her clinic surrounded by the lingering scent of blood and something else. something wild and earthy that reminded her of deep forests and moonlit nights. That evening, Emma sat in her apartment going through Sarah's medical files. She'd done this a dozen times already, but kept hoping she'd missed something, some detail that would explain the day's events. Instead, she found gaps. Missing test results. Consent forms with signatures that looked like Sarah's but felt wrong somehow. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the Riverside Cafe. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Come alone. You deserve to know the truth about your pregnancy. Emma stared at the message until the words blurred. Her pregnancy. Not Sarah's pregnancy. Not their pregnancy through surrogacy. Hers. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, trying to make sense of the fear blooming in her chest. The donor information had been anonymous, carefully screened. She'd followed every protocol, every safety measure. So why did she suddenly feel like she was carrying something that didn't belong to her? Outside her window, the city hummed with its usual evening rhythm. Traffic, sirens, the distant sound of construction. Normal sounds for a normal night. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her normal life was slipping away, that the baby growing inside her was connected to secrets she couldn't even begin to imagine. She thought about Marcus's eyes when he'd entered the clinic, how they'd seemed to glow in the fluorescent light. About Sarah's impossible recovery. About the scent of wild things that had clung to them both. The phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Don't meet with him. Some truths are more dangerous than lies. Trust no one. Emma's hands began to shake. 2 different numbers, 2 different warnings, both somehow knowing about a meeting she'd never agreed to attend. Her rational mind insisted this was some kind of prank, but her instincts she'd learned to trust during years of emergency medicine, screamed danger. She locked her apartment door, checked it twice, then pulled the curtains closed. But even behind drawn fabric, she felt watched. Studied. As if invisible eyes tracked her every movement. Sleep came in fragments that night, filled with dreams of running through endless forests while something howled in the distance. She woke repeatedly, hand pressed to her belly, heart pounding from nightmares she couldn't quite remember. In the thin light of dawn, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She was going to that meeting. The Riverside Cafe sat tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, the kind of place that served organic coffee in mismatched mugs and attracted customers who valued privacy over convenience. Emma arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table with clear sight lines to both the entrance and the back exit. She dressed carefully, jeans, comfortable shoes for running, a jacket loose enough to hide the small canister of pepper spray in her pocket. Her medical training had taught her to prepare for emergencies, and every instinct she possessed told her this qualified. At exactly 7 o'clock, a man entered the cafe and Emma's breath caught. He was tall, dark-haired, with the same predatory grace she'd noticed in Marcus. But where Marcus felt controlled, this man radiated barely contained energy. His eyes swept the room with military precision before settling on her. Dr. Clark. His voice was warm honey over steel. Thank you for coming. I don't even know who you are. Emma kept her voice steady despite the way her pulse jumped when he slid into the seat across from her. My name is Adrian Blackwood. And I'm the father of the child you're carrying. The words hit her like physical blows. Emma gripped the edge of the table, fighting the urge to run. That's impossible. The donor was anonymous. The clinic was compromised. Adrian's eyes never left hers. Your friend Sarah and her husband aren't who you think they are, Emma. And neither am I. This is insane. She started to stand, but Adrian's hand closed over hers. His skin was fever-warm, and she felt an electric jolt that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with recognition. As if her body knew his touch, had been waiting for it. Please, he said softly. Give me 5 minutes. After that, you can walk away and never see me again. But you need to know what you're carrying. Against every rational thought, Emma sat back down. 5 minutes. Adrian nodded, his relief visible. 3 months ago, your friend came to my fertility clinic. Not Dr. Hartwell's clinic, mine. She was desperate, willing to pay any price for a child. What she didn't tell you is that her husband Marcus is the alpha of the Northern Pack, and they needed an heir to secure his position. Alpha? Pack. Emma's voice sounded hollow. What are you talking about? Werewolves, Emma. Marcus is a werewolf, and so am I. Adrian's eyes seemed to shift color in the cafe's dim light, amber bleeding into brown. I agreed to be their donor because Marcus and I have been trying to broker peace between our territories for years. A child with both bloodlines could unite our packs. Emma laughed, the sound sharp and desperate. Werewolves. You're telling me werewolves are real, and I'm pregnant with some kind of supernatural baby. I'm telling you that 3 days before the procedure, someone broke into my clinic and replaced my sample with genetic material from Dante Rossi, the alpha of the Southern Pack and my sworn enemy. Adrian's voice dropped to a whisper. You're not carrying a child of peace, Emma. You're carrying the heir to the most dangerous werewolf bloodline in North America. The cafe seemed to tilt around her. Emma pressed her hands flat against the table, focusing on the solid wood beneath her palms. This isn't real. This can't be real. Sarah's hemorrhaging today. That was her body rejecting a child that isn't genetically connected to her husband. The baby you're carrying is so powerful that being near it is making other werewolves unstable. Adrian leaned forward. Emma, both Marcus and Dante are going to come for you. They'll want to claim the child, and they won't care what happens to you in the process. Stop. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Just stop. I don't know what kind of game this is, but... The cafe's front window exploded inward. Glass showered the interior as 3 figures in dark clothing burst through the opening. Customers screamed, diving under tables, but Emma couldn't move. She could only stare as the lead figure's face began to change, features stretching and sharpening, teeth elongating into something that belonged in nightmares. Found you, he snarled, and his voice was barely human. Adrian was moving before Emma could process what she'd seen, launching himself across the cafe with impossible speed. The impact when he collided with the lead attacker sent them both crashing into the espresso machine, metal shrieking and steam hissing. Run, Emma. Adrian's shout was punctuated by an inhuman growl that seemed to come from his chest. Get out of here. But Emma couldn't run, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because Adrian's face was changing too, bone and muscle shifting beneath his skin, and she finally understood that everything he'd told her was true. The baby she carried wasn't human. And neither were the men who wanted to take it from her. Emma's legs finally obeyed her screaming mind, propelling her toward the cafe's back exit as the sounds of destruction erupted behind her. Glass crunched under her feet, mixing with inhuman snarls and the crash of overturning furniture. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back, because seeing Adrian's face transform had shattered every rational thought she'd ever held about the world. The alley behind the cafe reeked of garbage and something else, something metallic that made her stomach lurch. Blood. Fresh blood, though she couldn't see its source in the gathering dusk. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone, muscle memory dialing 911 before logic kicked in. What would she tell them? That werewolves were fighting in a coffee shop over her unborn child? That her best friend had lied to her about everything, including the basic nature of reality itself? Emma ended the call before it connected and pressed her back against the brick wall, trying to catch her breath. The baby, God, the baby, fluttered inside her as if responding to her terror. She'd felt quickening before with other patients, but this was different. Stronger. More purposeful, like the child was trying to communicate. A shadow fell across the alley mouth, and Emma's blood turned to ice. Marcus stepped into view, his usually immaculate suit torn and stained. In the dim light, his eyes held an amber glow that definitely hadn't been there 3 hours ago when he'd carried Sarah from her clinic. Emma. His voice was gentler than she expected, almost pleading. Come with me. Please. I can keep you safe. Safe. The word came out as a bitter laugh. Safe from what, Marcus? From the truth? Because I'm pretty sure that ship has sailed. He took a step closer, and Emma caught that wild scent again. Pine and earth and something fundamentally untamed. From Dante's pack. They're the ones who attacked the cafe, who've been hunting you since they realized what you're carrying. What I'm carrying. Emma's hand moved protectively to her belly. You mean your child? The one you and Sarah lied to me about from the beginning. Marcus flinched as if she'd struck him. It's not my child, Emma. That's the problem. Adrian told me. About the switched samples, about Dante Rossi. Emma watched Marcus's expression harden at Adrian's name. Is it true? Adrian Blackwood is many things, but he's not a liar. Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, and Emma noticed his fingernails were longer than they should be, tapered to points. Someone in his organization betrayed him, replaced his genetic material with Dante's. The child you're carrying has the bloodline of our most dangerous enemy. And that makes me what? A weapon? A bargaining chip? Emma's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. I'm a person, Marcus. I have a life, a career, You have a target on your back. Marcus cut her off. Dante's pack won't stop hunting you. They want that child, and they'll kill anyone who gets in their way. Including you, once you've delivered. The casual way he said it, delivered, like she was a package service, made Emma's vision blur with rage. Get away from me. Emma, please. I said get away. She pushed past him, heading for the street, but Marcus caught her arm. His grip was firm but careful, as if he knew exactly how much pressure would bruise human skin. Sarah is waiting in the car, he said quietly. She wants to explain. Emma jerked free. Sarah had months to explain. Instead, she fed me lies and used me as an incubator for whatever this supernatural custody battle is about. She was protecting you. We both were. Marcus's amber eyes pleaded with her. If you'd known the truth from the beginning, would you have agreed? Would you have risked your life to help us? The honest answer was no, and they both knew it. Emma would have run screaming from any mention of werewolves and magical pregnancies. She would have recommended therapy and possibly psychiatric evaluation. But knowing that didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. Where's Adrian? She asked instead. Marcus's expression darkened. Gone. His pack retreated when mine arrived to provide backup. Backup? Emma looked around the alley, suddenly aware they weren't alone. Shadows moved at the edges of her vision, and she caught glimpses of amber eyes reflecting the streetlights. How many of you are there? Enough to keep you safe. Marcus extended his hand. Come with us, Emma. Let us protect you and the child. Emma stared at his outstretched palm, remembering all the times over the years when Marcus had been nothing but kind to her. He'd driven her to the hospital when she'd broken her wrist. Had sat with her through Sarah's worst miscarriage, holding them both while they cried. Had been the closest thing to a brother-in-law she'd ever had. But that man had been human. Or at least, she'd thought he was. I need time to think, she said finally. Time is what we don't have. Marcus dropped his hand. Dante's pack knows where you live, where you work. They know your routine, your friends, your favorite restaurants. Every second you spend out in the open is a second closer to them taking you. Taking me where? To whatever hole he's using as a base of operations. Dante Rossi collects powerful things, Emma. Artifacts, territory, people who can be useful to him. Marcus's voice turned grim. A woman carrying his genetic heir? You'd never see daylight again. Emma felt the baby flutter again, stronger this time, and a wave of fierce protectiveness crashed over her. Whatever else was happening, whatever lies she'd been told, the life inside her was innocent. Didn't deserve to be born into some supernatural war zone. If I come with you, she said slowly, what happens after the baby is born? Marcus hesitated just long enough for her to know she wouldn't like the answer. The child would be raised within the pack structure, he said carefully. Protected, educated, prepared for their eventual role as what? Your weapon against Dante. As a bridge between our people. A way to finally end the territorial wars that have been going on for generations. Emma closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what he was describing. And me? What happens to me in this grand plan? You'd be honored among our pack. Protected, provided for, given a place of respect. But not free. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. Never free to leave, never free to take my child and live a normal life. Marcus looked away. There is no normal life for that child, Emma. Not with Dante's bloodline running through their veins. They'll be powerful beyond imagining, but power like that needs guidance. Control. Control. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. Just like I'm being controlled right now. You're being protected. By people who lied to me. Emma's voice echoed off the alley walls. Sarah sat in my living room for months, watching me plan for this pregnancy, letting me get attached to a child that was never meant to be mine. You both watched me fall in love with the idea of helping you start a family, knowing the whole time that this baby would be taken from me the moment it was born. Marcus's shoulders sagged. We never meant for it to happen this way. But you're not sorry it did. Emma saw the truth in his expression. You're not sorry someone switched the samples, because now you have something even better than Adrian's child. You have Dante's heir, and you think that makes you untouchable. It makes the child untouchable, Marcus corrected. Do you have any idea what it means to carry the bloodline of 2 alpha families? That child will be able to command respect from every pack in North America. They could unite our people, end the violence. Or start a war that makes the current territorial disputes look like playground fights. Emma stepped back, putting distance between them. I've seen enough nature documentaries to know what happens when apex predators fight over territory. A new scent drifted through the alley, cigarettes and expensive cologne, with an underlying musk that made Emma's skin crawl. Marcus tensed, his entire body shifting into a defensive stance. Too late, he muttered. A man emerged from the shadows at the far end of the alley, and Emma knew immediately this was Dante Rossi. He was shorter than Marcus, more compact, but he moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had never doubted his own power. His dark hair was silver at the temples, and his smile was all sharp teeth. Marcus, Dante said pleasantly, as if they'd run into each other at a dinner party. Still playing the noble protector, I see. Dante. Marcus positioned himself between Emma and the other man. You're trespassing on Northern territory. Am I? Dante's smile widened. Because I was under the impression that Dr. Clark here was an independent contractor. Free to make her own choices about her future. She's under my protection. Ah, but she hasn't agreed to that protection, has she? Dante's eyes found Emma's over Marcus's shoulder. Hello, my dear. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Emma pressed herself against the brick wall, every instinct screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to go. Marcus blocked one end of the alley, Dante the other, and she could sense other shapes moving in the darkness beyond both men. I know who you are, she managed. Do you? I wonder. Dante took another step closer, and Emma caught the scent of predator, of something that hunted in the dark. I wonder if Marcus has told you the whole truth about what you're carrying. About what it means. Enough games, Dante. Marcus's voice dropped to a growl. State your business or get out. My business is with the mother of my child, Dante said smoothly. Emma, dear, has anyone explained to you the significance of a dual bloodline heir? The power they'll possess. Emma remained silent, but Dante continued as if she'd answered. They'll be able to shift at will from birth, without the usual limitations of age or moon cycles. They'll have enhanced strength, speed, and healing abilities that surpass even pure-blooded alphas. Most importantly, they'll carry the genetic markers that will allow them to challenge and potentially overthrow any existing pack leader. That's speculation, Marcus snapped. Is it? Dante's smile turned predatory. Because I have texts that are 300 years old describing exactly this scenario. The last time 2 alpha bloodlines merged, the resulting child conquered half of Europe before they reached adulthood. Emma's knees nearly gave out. Conquered. Don't listen to him, Marcus said urgently. He's trying to frighten you. I'm trying to educate her. Dante's voice remained calm, reasonable. Emma, that child you're carrying isn't just powerful, they're potentially unstoppable. The question becomes, who do you trust to guide that power? Marcus, who wants to use them as a political bridge. Or me, who understands what it means to rule with absolute authority. Neither of you, Emma said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Neither of you gets to decide what happens to my child. Dante laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your child? My dear, you're simply the vessel. A very important vessel, mind you, and one I intend to treat with the utmost care. But make no mistake, that child belongs to my bloodline. Over my dead body. If necessary, Dante said with chilling matter-of-factness. Though I'd prefer to keep you alive. Children need their mothers, especially in the early years. Marcus snarled, the sound barely human, and Emma watched in horrified fascination as his features began to shift. Bones cracked and reformed, muscle mass expanding beneath his torn suit. His fingernails extended into claws, and when he opened his mouth, she saw teeth designed for tearing flesh. You want her? Marcus's voice was distorted by the changes in his throat. Come and take her. But before either man could move, a new voice cut through the tension. That's enough. Sarah stepped into the mouth of the alley, and Emma's heart clenched at the sight of her best friend. Sarah looked pale, exhausted, but her eyes were steady as she looked between the two alphas. Both of you stand down, Sarah continued. Emma, we need to talk. Just the two of us. Sarah, Marcus started. I said stand down. There was authority in Sarah's voice that Emma had never heard before, and both men stepped back. Give us 10 minutes, please. Dante inclined his head. 10 minutes. After that, I'm taking what belongs to me. He melted back into the shadows with his pack, and Marcus reluctantly did the same, though Emma could feel his presence lingering at the edge of her awareness. Sarah approached slowly, hands visible, as if Emma were a wild animal who might bolt. Which, Emma reflected, wasn't far from the truth. I know you hate me right now, Sarah said quietly. Hate doesn't begin to cover it. Emma's voice was raw. You used me, Sarah. You made me fall in love with this baby, made me think I was doing something beautiful and generous, when all along you were just using my body as a breeding ground for your supernatural politics. Sarah flinched but didn't deny it. You're right. About all of it. Then why should I listen to anything else you have to say? Because I'm the only one here who actually cares about you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Marcus cares about his pack, about maintaining his position as alpha. Dante cares about power and conquest. Adrian cares about his wounded pride and the political implications of what happened. And you? I care about my best friend, who's pregnant and terrified and caught in the middle of something that's going to get her killed if she doesn't make the right choice. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I know I don't have the right to ask for your trust anymore, but I'm asking anyway. Emma stared at her friend, former friend? Trying to reconcile this woman with the Sarah who had held her hair when she was sick, who had celebrated every milestone of Emma's career, who had been the sister she'd never had. What choice? Emma asked finally. Come with Marcus and me. Let us protect you until the baby is born. Sarah's voice was urgent. After that, we disappear. All three of us. New identities, new lives, somewhere neither Dante nor Adrian will ever find us. Marcus would never agree to that. Marcus will do what I tell him to do. Sarah's smile was sad but determined. I'm his mate, Emma. In werewolf culture, that gives me certain influences over his decisions. Emma blinked. Mate. It's complicated. The human equivalent would be soulmate, but it runs deeper than that. Biological, spiritual, genetic. We're literally made for each other. Sarah touched Emma's arm gently. Which is why we needed a surrogate in the first place. I can't carry Marcus's children. My human genetics aren't compatible with his werewolf DNA. But you can influence his choices. When it matters most, yes. Sarah's grip tightened. And this matters most, Em. You and that baby matter more than pack politics or territorial disputes or anything else. Emma wanted to believe her. Desperately wanted to trust that Sarah's friendship was real, that the years they'd shared meant something beyond supernatural machinations. "What about Adrian?" she asked. "He seemed to think he had a claim on the baby too." Sarah's expression darkened. "Adrian Blackwood is dangerous in ways that neither Marcus nor Dante are. He doesn't just want power, he wants to understand it, to study it, to push the boundaries of what's possible." She shuddered. "If he gets his hands on your child, he won't just raise them to be a weapon. He'll experiment on them, try to enhance their abilities, see how far he can push their genetics before something breaks. And that's worse than Dante's conquest plans. At least Dante sees the child as valuable. Adrian sees them as a puzzle to be solved." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Please, Em. Trust me one more time. Let me get you out of this." Emma closed her eyes, one hand pressed to her belly where the baby continued to flutter with increasing agitation. Every choice she could make seemed to lead to danger, to a life where she'd never be free, never be safe, never be able to raise her child in peace. But maybe peace was a luxury she could no longer afford. 10 minutes is up, Dante's voice drifted from the shadows. "What's it going to be, Dr. Clark?" Emma opened her eyes and looked at Sarah, at the friend who had betrayed her but might be the only person standing between her and a fate worse than death. "I'll come with you," she said quietly. "But Sarah, if you're lying to me again." "I'm not." Sarah's relief was visible. "I swear on our friendship, on everything we've shared, I'm not lying to you about this." Emma nodded, praying she wasn't making the biggest mistake of her life. She had no way of knowing that in the shadows behind Dante, a figure with pale eyes and surgical scars had been listening to every word, already planning how to turn her decision to his advantage. The safe house was nothing like Emma had imagined. Instead of some remote cabin or abandoned warehouse, Marcus led them to an elegant brownstone in the city's historic district, complete with manicured gardens and brass nameplate reading Blackthorn Holdings. The irony wasn't lost on her. Hiding from werewolves in plain sight, surrounded by the scents and sounds of normal human life. Sarah had fallen asleep in the car during the 20-minute drive, her head resting against Emma's shoulder like they were teenagers again, heading home from a late movie. For a moment, Emma could almost pretend the last few hours hadn't happened, that her biggest worry was still whether to switch to a different prenatal vitamin. But the illusion shattered the moment they stepped inside. The house smelled wrong, too clean, too sterile, with an underlying musk that spoke of predators marking territory. Emma's enhanced senses, sharpened by whatever was growing inside her, picked up traces of at least a dozen different people who'd been here recently. "Pack members," Marcus explained, noticing her discomfort. "They've been securing the perimeter, making sure we weren't followed." "How many people are in your pack?" Emma asked, settling onto a leather couch that probably cost more than her monthly rent. 37 adults, 12 children. Marcus moved to the window, peering through blinds that looked decorative but were reinforced with steel. "We're one of the larger territories in the region." "Children." Emma's hand moved instinctively to her belly. "There are werewolf children?" Sarah stirred from her exhaustion long enough to squeeze Emma's knee. "They're just kids, Em. They go to school, play soccer, fight over video games. The supernatural stuff doesn't usually manifest until puberty." "Usually?" "Well," Marcus said carefully, "children with alpha bloodlines sometimes show signs earlier. Enhanced reflexes, improved healing, that sort of thing." Emma felt the baby shift restlessly, as if responding to the conversation. Over the past few hours, the movements had become more frequent, more purposeful. Like the child was listening, learning, preparing for a world Emma still couldn't fully comprehend. "What about my baby?" The words came out smaller than she'd intended. "When will the changes start?" Marcus and Sarah exchanged another of their loaded glances, the kind that had driven Emma crazy before she'd known what they were hiding. "We don't know," Sarah admitted. "There's never been a dual alpha bloodline before. The genetics are uncharted territory." "But you have theories." Emma's medical training kicked in, demanding facts even when the facts defied everything she'd been taught about biology. "What do your ancient texts say about power like this?" "That it's been feared for good reason," a new voice said from the doorway. Emma spun around to find an elderly woman watching them with sharp green eyes. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. But something about her presence made the air in the room feel heavier, more charged. "Emma, this is Elena Blackthorne, my grandmother and the pack's senior advisor," Marcus said, his tone respectful in a way Emma had never heard from him before. "The woman carrying fire and fury in her womb," Elena said, approaching with measured steps. "May I?" Before Emma could ask what she meant, Elena placed a weathered hand on Emma's belly. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, but Emma felt a jolt of electricity that made her gasp. Elena's eyes widened, then closed. For 30 seconds, the only sound in the room was Emma's rapid breathing and the distant hum of city traffic. When Elena finally opened her eyes, her expression was troubled. "The child is aware," she said quietly. "More aware than any unborn should be. It knows we're here, knows we're discussing its future." Elena's gaze found Emma's. "It's frightened." "Frightened?" Emma's voice cracked. "Of what?" "Of being alone. Of being different. Of the hunger that's already stirring in its blood." Elena stepped back, her hand trembling slightly. "This child will be magnificent and terrible, Dr. Clark. The question is whether we can teach it to be more of the former than the latter." Sarah leaned forward. "Grandmother Elena, what did you see?" "Power beyond measure. Intelligence that will surpass adult minds before the child reaches school age. And loneliness that could drive it to either greatness or madness." Elena's voice was heavy with centuries of knowledge Emma couldn't begin to fathom. The last dual bloodline child conquered half of Europe, yes. But not out of ambition. Out of a desperate need to find others like itself. Emma felt tears she hadn't realized were falling. "So my baby is going to be a monster?" "Your baby is going to be extraordinary," Elena corrected gently. "Whether that manifests as monstrous or miraculous depends entirely on how it's raised, by whom, and with what intentions." The room fell silent, and Emma found herself thinking about all the children she'd delivered over the years. The quiet moments when she'd placed a newborn in their mother's arms, watching love and terror war across faces as parents realized the magnitude of what they'd taken on. Every child was extraordinary in their own way, but this felt different. Bigger. More impossible. "There's something else," Marcus said reluctantly. "Elena, show her the message." Elena produced a phone from her pocket, its screen cracked but functional. She handed it to Emma, who read the displayed text with growing horror. "Dr. Clark. My name is Adrian Blackwood. I need to meet with you again, privately this time. What I didn't tell you at the cafe is that I've been having dreams about the child you're carrying. Visions, actually. I see what it becomes if it stays with Marcus's pack, and I see what it becomes if Dante claims it. Neither future ends well for you or for the child. There is a third option, but it requires trust and courage beyond anything you've shown so far. The old museum on 5th Street, basement level, tomorrow at midnight. Come alone, or watch your child become something that will haunt your nightmares forever." Emma's hands shook as she set the phone down. "Visions. Some of our kind have prophetic abilities," Elena explained. "It's rare, usually manifests in times of great upheaval or change." "And you believe him? About the visions?" "Adrian Blackwood is many things, but he's never claimed abilities he doesn't possess," Marcus said grimly. "If he says he's seen possible futures, then he probably has." "What did he see?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "We don't know. But given his reputation." Marcus trailed off. "What reputation?" Sarah took Emma's hand. "Adrian isn't just an alpha, Em. He's what we call a shadow walker. Someone who can move between the supernatural world and the human world without leaving traces. He's been studying the boundaries between our species for decades, looking for ways to enhance werewolf abilities." "You mean experimenting," Emma said, remembering Sarah's earlier warnings. "More than that. He's been trying to create artificial werewolves. Humans who've been genetically modified to carry our abilities without the weaknesses." Elena's expression darkened. "Most of his subjects don't survive the process." Emma felt sick. And he wants my baby for his experiments. We don't think he wants to experiment on the child, Marcus said slowly. We think he wants to study how the child was created, to see if he can replicate the dual bloodline process artificially. Which would require. Emma couldn't finish the sentence. Blood samples. Tissue samples. Possibly surgical biopsies. Elena's voice was clinical, but Emma caught the rage burning beneath the surface. A child that powerful would provide genetic material for thousands of potential subjects. The baby kicked violently, as if responding to Emma's spike of terror and fury. She pressed both hands to her belly, trying to offer comfort she wasn't sure she possessed. I'm not going to that meeting, she said firmly. Good, Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. We'll increase security, maybe move to a different safe house. But what if he's right? Emma interrupted. What if staying here, or going with Dante, really does lead to some terrible future for my child? Emma, no. Marcus's voice held a warning. Adrian is manipulative. He's probably lying about the visions to get you to trust him. Probably isn't good enough. Emma stood up, pacing to the window where she could see normal people living normal lives on the street below. A couple walking their dog. A teenager on a skateboard. An elderly man reading a newspaper on a bench. None of them worrying about supernatural politics or dual bloodline heirs. I want to call my sister, she said suddenly. The room fell silent. Emma, Sarah said carefully, you can't involve your family in this. She's a lawyer. She deals with custody disputes all the time. Maybe there's some legal avenue. There is no legal avenue for supernatural custody disputes, Marcus cut her off. Human law doesn't recognize werewolf territorial rights or bloodline claims. Then maybe human law is what I need. Emma turned to face them all. What if I disappear into the human world completely? Change my identity, move somewhere remote, raise my child as a normal human being? It won't work, Elena said gently. The child's abilities will manifest regardless of how you raise it. And when they do, every pack in North America will sense the power signature. You'd be found within days. Emma sank back onto the couch, the weight of her situation crushing down on her. Every option led to danger, to a life of hiding and fear and constant vigilance. The child she'd thought would bring joy and completion to someone else's family had instead become the center of a supernatural storm she didn't understand. There might be another way, Elena said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the elderly woman, who was staring out the window with an expression Emma couldn't read. What way? Marcus asked. The old agreements. The territorial accords signed after the last Great War. Elena moved away from the window, her steps suddenly energized. There are provisions for disputed claims, for situations where traditional custody arrangements would lead to chaos. You're talking about the conclave, Marcus said, and Emma caught the note of fear in his voice. What's the conclave? Emma asked. A gathering of all pack leaders in North America. A tribunal, essentially, where disputes that can't be resolved through normal channels are brought for final judgment. Elena's eyes gleamed. If we could petition for a conclave ruling on the child's custody. They haven't convened a conclave in over a century, Sarah protested. The political ramifications alone would be enormous, Elena agreed. Every pack would have to send representatives. Old grudges would surface, territorial boundaries would be questioned, power structures could shift dramatically. But Emma would get a fair hearing? Marcus asked. More than fair. The child would be evaluated by neutral parties, their future determined by consensus rather than conquest. Elena turned to Emma. It's dangerous, and the process could take months, but it's the only way to ensure your child isn't simply claimed as property by whoever proves strongest. Emma felt a flicker of hope for the first time since the cafe window had exploded. How do we petition for a conclave? Carefully, Elena said. And with the understanding that once we invoke the old laws, there's no going back. Every pack leader in the continent will know about your child, about their potential. The secrecy that's been protecting you disappears. But they can't just take the baby? If there's a formal process, rules to follow. The conclave's judgment is absolute. Once they make a ruling, every pack is bound to honor it. Elena's expression grew serious. But Emma, you need to understand what you're asking for. This isn't a human court. These are predators judging the fate of what they see as the most valuable prize in generations. They'll evaluate you as much as the child, deciding whether you're capable of raising something that powerful. And if they decide I'm not? Then the child goes to whoever they deem most suitable. Permanently. Emma closed her eyes, trying to weigh the risks. A formal process that could end with her losing the baby forever, versus the current situation where 3 different factions wanted to control both her and the child. How long do I have to decide? She asked. Not long, Elena said. Word of the child's existence is already spreading through supernatural channels. Within days, packs from across the continent will start arriving, looking to either claim or eliminate what they see as a threat to their own power. As if summoned by Elena's words, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. What is it? Sarah asked. Dante's pack isn't the only one in the city anymore, Marcus said grimly. We've got scouts from at least 4 other territories moving into our area, including the Northwest Coalition. Emma had never heard of the Northwest Coalition, but Elena sucked in a sharp breath. How many? The elderly woman asked. At least 30 wolves. Possibly more. Marcus was already moving toward a cabinet that Emma now realized contained weapons. They're not here to talk. Who are they? Emma demanded. Isolationists, Elena explained tersely. They believe werewolves should remain completely separate from human society. A child with dual alpha bloodlines raised in the human world would represent everything they oppose. So they want to kill the baby? They want to kill you both, Sarah said, pulling Emma toward the back of the house. Grandmother Elena, how quickly can you contact the conclave? Give me an hour, Elena said, already dialing numbers on her phone. But I'll need Emma's formal consent to the process. Emma looked around the room at these people who had become her unlikely protectors, feeling the baby shift restlessly inside her as if sensing the approaching danger. You have it, she said. Contact the conclave. Elena nodded grimly and began speaking in rapid, urgent tones to whoever had answered her call. Outside, Emma could hear the distant sound of howling, growing closer by the minute. The hunter's moon was rising, and the hunt was about to begin. The howling stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m., and Emma knew that was somehow worse than the sound itself. For the past 3 hours, she'd listened to the supernatural chorus growing closer, a symphony of voices that spoke of ancient hunts and primal hunger. Now, in the sudden silence, she could practically feel predators positioning themselves around the safe house. Conclave accepted the petition, Elena announced, ending her latest phone call. Emergency session, sunrise tomorrow at neutral grounds in the Adirondacks. Tomorrow. Sarah's voice pitched higher. That's impossible. It takes weeks to organize a proper conclave. Not when half the continent's pack leaders are already converging on the city, Elena said grimly. They were planning to settle this through combat anyway. The formal petition just gives them a legal framework to work within. Emma pressed her face against the reinforced window, trying to see past the curtains. The street looked normal, parked cars, streetlights, the occasional late-night pedestrian, but her enhanced senses picked up movement in the shadows, eyes that reflected light like amber mirrors. How many are out there? She whispered. 63 wolves from 7 different packs, Marcus replied, checking his weapons one more time. All waiting to see what we do next. They're not attacking. Not yet. Elena's petition bought us temporary neutrality. No one wants to be seen violating conclave protocols before the session even begins. Marcus's smile held no warmth. Of course, that protection ends the moment we leave this house. Emma's hand moved to her belly, where the baby had been unusually quiet for the past hour. She'd grown accustomed to constant movement, the flutter of tiny limbs that seemed to respond to her emotional state. The stillness felt ominous. Something's wrong, she said suddenly. Sarah was at her side in an instant. What kind of wrong? The baby. It's not moving. Emma's voice began to rise with panic. Earlier it was so active, and now, nothing. Elena approached, her weathered hands gentle as they touched Emma's abdomen. The elderly woman's eyes closed in concentration, and Emma felt that same electric jolt she'd experienced before. But this time, Elena's expression grew troubled. The child is listening, Elena said slowly. Not sleeping. Listening to something we can't hear. Listening to what? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's coming from the north. Elena's eyes snapped open. From the direction of the conclave grounds. A new scent drifted through the house's ventilation system, antiseptic and ozone, with an underlying smell that reminded Emma unpleasantly of her anatomy lab in medical school. Formaldehyde and preserved flesh. Marcus went rigid. Adrian. Here? Now. Sarah moved to another window, peering out into the night. I don't see his pack. You won't, Elena said darkly. Shadow walkers don't travel with packs when they're hunting. The front door exploded inward without warning or sound, as if the lock had simply decided to stop existing. Adrian Blackwood stepped through the opening, and Emma's breath caught at the change in him. Where before he'd been controlled, almost civilized, now he radiated barely contained energy. His eyes held flecks of silver that seemed to move independently of his pupils, and surgical scars she hadn't noticed before were visible along his jawline and neck. Dr. Clark, he said pleasantly, as if he'd been invited for tea. I'm disappointed you chose not to meet me at the museum. Adrian, you're in violation of the neutrality agreement, Marcus growled, positioning himself between Adrian and Emma. Am I? I wasn't aware that shadow walkers were bound by pack politics. Adrian's smile revealed teeth that were sharper than they should be, filed to points that gleamed in the lamplight. Besides, I'm not here as an alpha. I'm here as a researcher with a proposition. We're not interested in your propositions, Sarah snapped. You should be. Especially given what I learned during my consultations with the other pack leaders currently surrounding your safe house. Adrian moved further into the room with fluid grace, and Emma noticed he cast no reflection in the mirror behind him. Consultations. Elena's voice carried a warning note. Oh yes. Very illuminating conversations about the conclave's likely decision regarding Dr. Clark's child. Adrian's silver-flecked eyes found Emma's. Would you like to know what conclusion they've reached? The conclave hasn't met yet, Marcus said. No, but the pack leaders have been discussing the situation informally, and I'm afraid the consensus is quite unfavorable for our dear doctor. Adrian pulled out a tablet, swiping through what looked like official documents. 68% believe the child should be raised by Dante's pack, given his genetic claim. 22% favor the northern pack, citing territorial rights. 8% want the child eliminated as a threat to supernatural secrecy. Emma's knees nearly gave out. And the remaining 2%? Abstentions. Minor packs without enough political influence to matter. Adrian set the tablet aside. 0%, Dr. Clark, believe you should be allowed to raise your own child. That's impossible, Sarah protested. The conclave has to consider the mother's rights. The mother's human, Adrian interrupted. In supernatural law, that makes her a caretaker at best, property at worst. The conclave will thank her for her service and award custody to whoever makes the strongest case for managing the child's power. Emma sank into a chair, the magnitude of her situation crashing over her. She'd fought so hard for a chance at justice, for a fair hearing that would protect her child's future. Instead, she'd walked into a legal proceeding designed to take everything away from her. Why are you telling us this? Marcus demanded. Because I have an alternative proposal. One that serves everyone's interests. Adrian moved closer to Emma, and she caught that antiseptic scent again, stronger now. Dr. Clark, what if I told you there was a way to ensure your child would never be controlled by pack politics? Never be used as a weapon or a political bridge? I'm listening, Emma said quietly, ignoring Sarah's sharp intake of breath. My research has developed a process that can modify supernatural genetics. Remove the werewolf elements while retaining enhanced intelligence and physical capabilities. Adrian's voice took on the fervor of a true believer. Your child would be extraordinary but human, free to live whatever life you choose for them. Modify how? Elena asked, her voice deadly calm. Gene therapy, administered in utero. Completely painless for both mother and child, with a 93% success rate in animal trials. Adrian produced a syringe filled with silver liquid from his coat pocket. One injection, Dr. Clark, and your child becomes everything you hoped for when you first agreed to the surrogacy. Normal. Human. Yours. Emma stared at the syringe, hope and terror warring in her chest. What about the 7% failure rate? Minor complications. Delayed healing abilities, occasional sensory spikes. Nothing that would interfere with a normal human life. You're lying, Marcus snarled. What really happens in the 7%? Adrian's smile faltered for just a moment. The subject's experience, difficulty, integrating the genetic modifications. Difficulty how? They die, Elena said flatly, reading something in Adrian's expression that Emma had missed. The 7% die, don't they? Scientific progress requires acceptable losses, Adrian said, his composure returning. But consider the alternative, Dr. Clark. Your child raised by Dante as a weapon of conquest. Or by Marcus as a political tool. Or eliminated entirely by the isolationists. Emma found herself reaching for the syringe, then stopped. How do I know this isn't just another form of control? Another way of turning my child into your experiment? Because after the injection, I disappear. You never see me again, never hear from my organization again. The child grows up human, and you get the normal life you've been fighting for. And what do you get out of it? Adrian's eyes gleamed. Scientific data that will revolutionize supernatural medicine. The genetic samples from a successful dual bloodline modification will allow me to develop treatments for dozens of werewolf hereditary conditions. Samples, Emma repeated. You want to take samples from my baby? Non-invasive collection during the modification process. A few milliliters of blood, some cellular material. Nothing that would harm the child or affect their development. Emma looked around the room at the faces of people she'd come to trust despite their betrayals. Marcus looked murderous. Sarah appeared torn between hope and horror. Elena was studying Adrian with the intensity of someone trying to solve a dangerous puzzle. Grandmother Elena, Emma said quietly. In your professional opinion, would this work? It might, Elena admitted reluctantly. Adrian's reputation for genetic manipulation is impressive. But the risks are acceptable compared to the certainty of what happens if we do nothing, Emma finished. My child becomes someone else's property, raised to be something I never wanted them to become. Emma, no. Sarah gripped her arm. We'll fight the conclave decision. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Emma gently freed herself from Sarah's grasp. You said it yourself, supernatural law doesn't recognize human parental rights. This is my only chance to keep my child. She reached for the syringe, but Marcus caught her wrist. Dr. Clark, once that injection is administered, there's no going back. If something goes wrong, then at least my child dies free instead of living as someone else's weapon. The words hung heavy in the room, and Emma realized she meant them. Death was preferable to a lifetime of supernatural slavery, for her child and for herself. Very well, Adrian said, stepping forward. If you're certain. I'm certain. The injection took less than 30 seconds. Adrian's hands were steady, professional, as he administered the silver liquid that would either save or damn her child. Emma felt a warmth spreading through her abdomen, followed by the strongest fetal movement she'd experienced since the pregnancy began. The child is responding well, Adrian observed, monitoring her pulse. Heart rate stable, no adverse reactions. How long before we know if it worked? The genetic modifications will complete within 6 hours. By morning, your child will be genetically human with enhanced capabilities. No pack will be able to sense their supernatural heritage. And if it doesn't work? Adrian packed his equipment with clinical efficiency. You'll know within the first hour. Severe cramping, bleeding, fever. If those symptoms don't appear, the procedure was successful. That's it. Emma couldn't believe it was so simple. After everything that's happened, the solution is a single injection? Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most elegant, Adrian replied. Now, I suggest you prepare for the conclave meeting. Even with the modifications, they'll still want to examine the child to verify the genetic changes. Wait, Sarah said suddenly. If the baby is genetically human now, why would the conclave still have jurisdiction? Adrian's smile returned, and Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Because the modifications won't be detectable for another 12 hours. Long enough for the conclave to make their custody decision, but not long enough for them to realize the child is no longer supernaturally significant. You're setting us up, Marcus accused. You want us to go to the conclave meeting with a human child, let them award custody to another pack, then reveal the modifications afterward. The resulting chaos should be quite entertaining, Adrian agreed. Pack leaders discovering they've been fighting over a human child? Political alliances crumbling over what amounts to a medical intervention? It will take decades for the power structures to stabilize. Emma felt sick. You're using my child to destabilize supernatural politics. I'm using my scientific advancement to create a more rational world order. Your child simply happened to be the perfect catalyst. Adrian moved toward the door. Don't worry, Dr. Clark. By the time the dust settles, you'll be long gone with your perfectly human baby. And the 7% chance? Will be evident within the hour, as I mentioned. Adrian paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, I hope you're in the 93%. You've been remarkably entertaining throughout this process. He disappeared into the night, leaving Emma alone with the 3 people she'd come to depend on and a decision that couldn't be undone. The first cramps started 47 minutes later. Emma doubled over on the couch, her abdomen seizing with pain that felt like molten metal spreading through her muscles. Sarah was beside her instantly, checking her pulse, monitoring her breathing, but Emma could see the fear in her friend's eyes. It's not working, Emma gasped between contractions. The 7%. I'm in the 7%. We don't know that yet, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Sometimes genetic modifications cause temporary discomfort. Emma's scream cut her off as another wave of agony crashed over her. This time, she felt something wet and warm spreading between her legs. Hospital, Marcus said immediately. Now. No. Emma gripped Sarah's hand with desperate strength. If I'm dying, I'm not dying in some sterile room surrounded by strangers. I'm dying here, with people who care about me. You're not dying, Elena said firmly, placing her hands on Emma's belly. The elderly woman's expression grew distant, concentrated. The child is fighting the modifications. It doesn't want to be human. What? The genetic changes are being rejected by the fetal immune system. The child's supernatural heritage is stronger than Adrian anticipated. Elena's eyes snapped open. Emma, your baby is trying to save itself by rejecting the modifications. Can it do that? I don't know. This has never happened before. Emma felt another contraction, but this one was different. Instead of pure pain, she sensed communication. The child inside her wasn't just fighting the genetic modifications, it was trying to tell her something. Trust me, the feeling seemed to say. I know what I am. Emma closed her eyes, focusing on that impossible connection with her unborn child. In her mind, she felt vast intelligence, ancient wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone who hadn't even been born yet. The modifications will fade, the presence continued. I am choosing what to become. Emma. Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. Your vitals are stabilizing. Emma opened her eyes to find the pain receding, replaced by a sense of profound calm. The bleeding had stopped, and the cramping was fading to manageable levels. The child rejected Adrian's modifications, Elena announced, wonder in her voice. It chose to remain supernatural. But that means... Emma began. That means the conclave still has jurisdiction, Marcus finished grimly. And we still have to face them at sunrise. Emma looked around the room at her unlikely family, the werewolf who'd lied to her but protected her, the friend who'd betrayed her but tried to save her, the wise woman who'd guided her through impossible choices. In a few hours, they'd face a supernatural tribunal that would decide her child's fate. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Emma felt a flicker of genuine hope. Her child had just demonstrated power beyond anything Adrian's science could create or control. Power that came with intelligence, with choice, with the ability to determine its own destiny. Maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to convince the conclave that this child deserved to choose its own path. The sun began to rise over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded Emma of amber eyes and ancient wisdom. It was time to face the future her child had chosen. Epilogue. 6 months later. Emma rocked her daughter in the nursery of their small house in Vermont, watching snow fall outside windows that looked out on nothing but forest for miles in every direction. Anya, she'd named her Anya, gurgled contentedly, her eyes the same amber brown that had marked her supernatural heritage from birth. The conclave had been unexpected. When the pack leaders realized they were dealing with a child who could consciously control her own genetic expression, who had rejected scientific modification through sheer force of will, the political calculations changed overnight. This wasn't just a powerful heir. This was something unprecedented in supernatural history. In the end, they'd chosen the most radical option possible, complete autonomy. Anya would be raised by her mother, protected by the collective supernatural community, but free to choose her own allegiances when she came of age. No pack claims, no political obligations, no predetermined destiny. Emma suspected Elena's influence had been crucial in that decision, but she'd never asked for details. Some gifts were better accepted without question. Sarah and Marcus visited every few weeks, still working to build bridges between the human and supernatural worlds. Adrian had disappeared entirely, his research facility abandoned, though Emma sometimes caught glimpses of silver eyes watching from the forest edge. And Anya. Anya was everything Emma had hoped for and nothing like what anyone had expected. She was developing faster than human children but with a gentleness that belied her supernatural strength. She seemed drawn to both worlds, equally fascinated by picture books and the howling of wolves in the distance. "What are you going to be when you grow up?" Emma whispered to her daughter, who reached up with tiny fingers to touch her mother's face. Anya smiled, and for just a moment, Emma could have sworn she heard an answer carried on the winter wind: free. Outside, snow continued to fall on a world where a human doctor and her supernatural daughter could build whatever future they chose together. It was more than enough.